Trust me, the Xenomorphs Royal Society can give the human monarchs a run for their money. And you know what's the best part? We have a boss lady at the top of the hierarchy, the Xenomorph Queen. They are responsible for organizing and controlling the entire Hive, acting as the primary leader of the group. Whoever said women can't do it all, I'll let the alien's inner jaw speak. So hop on, because we're going to explore every type of Xenomorph Queen as shown up in movies, games, and comics. Just a heads up, some of these have been based on fan interpretations, extended canon, non-canon lore, and my personal thoughts. So fans, if you don't see a canon-specific info, know that I dug deeper than that. Cloned Auriga Queen, Alien Resurrection. They killed off Ripley in Alien 3, and we knew that it's difficult for a franchise to go on without her. Of course, they brought her back as a clone, Ripley 8, and this time around threw in a genetically modified Xenomorph Queen, the clone Auriga Queen, which was connected to Ripley carrying a Queen chestburster on Fury 161. The USM conducted a project for 10 long years to recreate Xenomorph 1010-121. As usual, the goal was to use it as a biological weapon. They used Ripley's blood samples to create Ripley 8, and once that was done, they got access to the Queen chestburster. Bingo! USM surgically removed the infant xenomorph and allowed it to grow into a full queen, capable of producing eggs. Her eggs were then harvested and used to impregnate a group of abducted civilians. The clone Auriga Queen spent much of her early days as a test subject for Dr. Wren and his team. Oh, I guess by now we know how the nomenclature works. Based on the place they were born in, rather hatched in, this one did so on USM Auriga in 2381, hence the name. Anyway, Auriga was not exactly happy to be captive, and even when kept in isolation, she was fully aware of her offspring's birth. She patiently waited for the right time to escape and start a hive of her own. No sooner said than done. Queen Auriga used her intelligence to provoke an outbreak and used her kids to slaughter the vessel's crew. They were finally free, and the Queen was established her hive in a waste tank at the bottom of the ship. However, neither the scientists nor she knew that they effed up the cloning process, making Auriga somewhat more vulnerable than a true Xenomorph Queen. Ripley's DNA caused troubles for Queen Auriga, and she had to go through a second, extremely painful reproductive cycle, which resulted in her birth, a human xenomorph hybrid. Sadly, this newborn considered Riley 8 to be her actual mother and turned on the Queen, thus killing her with its bare hands. Queen Auriga was not as powerful as one would think. In fact, she might be the weakest one in the list. Still, she was extremely cunning, and that deserves recognition. Auriga was the first of her type. Before her, we haven't even heard of Xenomorph, let alone a Xenomorph Queen having some sort of mental link to a human or inheriting their memory. But Auriga proved that this utterly insane idea was valid because it was heavily suggested that she could communicate with Ripley 8 to a certain extent using telepathy, access Ellen Ripley's memories from the past events, and could make sense of human language, as she did while reading the sign outside of the door her containment unit was in. Moreover, Queen Auriga could also recognize faces. She figured the scientist studying her was present when she was being removed from Ripley 8's body. Though she was an immature chestburster at the time, well, I can't even remember what I had for dinner 2 nights ago. The Arctic Queen, Alien vs. Predator. For once, let's not debate over the canonical status of this film, because the truth is, they delighted us with a badass Xenomorph Queen. The Arctic Queen was about 5,000 years old, which made her a lot senior to even Queen Arachnon. Ages ago, predators caught the Arctic Queen and imprisoned her inside the pyramid. Her only purpose was to keep on laying eggs. And humans were sacrificed to the xenomorphs to make hosts and mature, all for the young predators to come and hunt xenomorphs as a rite of passage. Though the Queen was immobile due to forced cryogenic sleep for a millennia, her children eventually outwitted the predators and the human civilization they had built. When Charles Bishop Whalen's team went on expedition, they accidentally awakened the Queen, who immediately started delivering eggs again. I'm sure you all know the drill. However, her xenomorph babies fought against the Yachas. However, the real game began when her drones intentionally attacked her. Once again, a brilliant move. It's implied that she knew that the only way to break free from the chains was to use her acid blood and use the Hive's shared consciousness to call her kids for help. The Arctic Queen was indeed successful, and after shedding her omniposterior, she tried to escape the pyramid. However, the Predator Scar foiled her plans, and he even hunted her offsprings. Enraged on losing her brood, she now made it to the surface. Scar, Lex, who was the only human survivor in this movie, and the Queen engaged in a ferocious battle. Despite Scar and Lex teaming up to take her down, she was nearly indomitable. She fatally wounded Scar by using her tail before being ultimately wiped off by Lex and Scar. If you think about it, the Arctic Queen clearly won despite her own end, because she did manage to kill Scar. See, I'm not picking sides, because I love both franchises, but I can't deny that this Xenomorph Queen was an absolute terror. When it comes to her personality, it was more or less the same as the other queens. She was protective of her hive and understandably harbored a deep seated grudge against the Yacha for using her to just breed and then kill her children. Yes, she was cunning and powerful, yet she's not my top queen over Acheron. Queen Cheron Base, Alien Rogue, the comics. The Xenomorph world is meant to be ruled by a queen. This was actually proven in the 4-issue comic book series titled Alien Rogue of 1993. So in this story, written by Ian Egdington, a mad scientist, Dr. Ernest Klintz, wanted to experiment and create an alien king. Klintz was successful, but his king escaped only to fight the queen, which was bred on Cheron Base, which was a distant deep space research facility built by the ZCT Corporation. Cheron Base's queen was significantly smaller than this newly crowned Xenomorph king, and the battle seemed kind of one-sided. On one hand, we had a genetically modified beast who was out of his mind and caused major havoc. On the other hand, we had a mother and monarch who was challenged when her hive was attacked. As they say, health has no fury as a woman scorned, and in the end, our queen turned out to be way smarter than the king, overpowering him. Unfortunately, she could not sit and bask on her victory and laurels as the entire Cheron Base exploded, destroying all of the Xenomorphs. Queen Mother and the Red Queen Mother, Alien Female War and Aliens Genocide Comics. The name says it all. She was the mother of all the queens, meaning she could guide and control other Xenomorph queens across the galaxy. Obviously, there was no one above her, and she presided over the topmost level of the hierarchy. Coming to how the Queen Mother just sat there and pulled the strings, it had to do with having a telepathic link to the entire Xenomorph species. Using that, she could influence all the other queens' behavior and even manipulate human dreams. I mean, she was the ultimate ruler for a reason, duh. In this particular comic story, Alien Female War, the Queen Mother met with a deadly fate. She was captured and brought to Earth, where a nuclear explosion ultimately ended her. The moment she died, a Game of Thrones started in the Xenomorph world. A Black Queen and her troop of regular Xenomorphs, and a Red Queen with her group of ren-skinned aliens. Now, the mutated red one would initially overpower the Black Queen's fragment in the Civil War and formed her own colony with the Red Queen as their leader. However, when the humans entered, the equation changed completely. As usual, they had a profit-making plan in mind and wanted to bring back a valuable substance called the Royal Jelly. The mutated jelly was no use to them, so they blew up the Red Queen's hive as a distraction. This encouraged the Black Xenomorphs to rampage through the Red forces. Dum Dum gave the humans a window to steal the Royal Jelly from their hive, while the alien segments fought amongst themselves. In the end, it was thus the Black Queen's lineage that won this war. The Red Queen, however, emerged as one of the most distinct Xenomorph queens, with NECA paying a tribute to her by producing her as an action figure for one of the aliens' toy line. Flying Queen, comics and game. If you snooped around in various expanded universe materials of the aliens, I'm sure you've come across the Xenomorph Queen. The Flying Queen, known for her huge bat-like wings, was first introduced by Kenner in Alien Space Marine comics. The Flying Queen did not care who she was attacking. Humans and other xenomorphs were all the same to her, and she aggressively targeted them both from above. Sometime later, in Alien Armageddon arcade shooter, these traits of the Flying Queen were clearly depicted. Apart from these, we have another crossover comic titled Alien Vampirilla, where a chest burster was born out of Vampirilla, and it developed both wings and vampiric features due to her host's DNA. In short, the Flying Queen was a terrible force to reckon with. The Matriarch. Games. This queen had a rough time from the very beginning. She was a very old xenomorph queen who was first taken hostage by the Predators and brought to a planet, BG-386. Then, 1,000 years later, the Matriarch fell into the hands of Weyland-Yutani. I guess the latter was a little worse for her. They conducted several experiments on her, and the Matriarch was finally released by Specimen 6. We will get into that one shortly. By the time the Matriarch could see the light of day again, she was white and pretty much mummified. However, she still had the strength to lay eggs and command her xenomorph hive to attack. Boy, these alien queens are on a different level of toughness. Tragically, the Matriarch passed away when the Colonial Marine rookie detonated the fuel tanks around her, passing over the authority to someone else. Specimen 6. Games. I wasn't dropping hints about Specimen 6 for no reason at all. She was the one who rose to power after the Matriarch died. Specimen 6 was the xenomorph bred at Weyland-Yutani Research Center on BG-386. She appeared as a regular drone shortly after her birth under the supervision of Dr. Groves. However, Specimen 6 soon grew into a Praetorian and eventually to a queen. By this point, she had shed her original carapace and no longer had the number 6 branded on her head. You go, girl. Specimen 6 served the Matriarch loyalty and exhibited typical xenomorph traits like moving quickly across walls, ceilings, and floors, or leaping large distances to catch her prey. Yet, if you look closely enough, you'd notice that her combat skills were somewhat advanced, especially when she defeated numerous predators single-handedly. Now, about Specimen 6 intelligence, yeah, she was uniquely smart. Even at the time of her birth, she displayed signs of above-average intelligence and abilities. Let me explain. When Specimen 6 realized that she was about to be confined, she burrowed back into her host. However, the humans still managed to imprison her when she emerged from the chest cavity and jumped right into a container. In her adult stage, Specimen 6 was probably brighter than me. She knew how to cut power to vital systems, destroying light sources to lure in her enemies, and was also strategic in her attacks. Specimen 6 intelligence came at the cost of sadism. Dr. Groves noted that she often liked toying with her prey before killing it. Level 426 Queen. Oh boy, this Xenomorph Queen is unforgettable. The camera slowly panned over her seemingly endless oviposture, surrounded by countless eggs and that gnarly face. Pure chills. So, how did the level 426 Queen of the Acheron Queen come to exist? As it happens that during the early stages of xenomorph infestation in Hadley's Hope, one of the aliens that emerged ultimately grew into a queen in 2179. Soon she assumed responsibility of being an empress and began laying eggs as her drones. Her kids were pretty well trained, too, because they continued to bring captive colonists to the Hive to serve as hosts. All was hunky-dory for the Queen and her kids, till the Colonial Marines squad poked their noses into her business. Under the command of Lieutenant Gorman and Ripley as a special advisor, they entered Hadley's Hope to investigate. Ripley agreed to relive the nightmare only on one condition, that they exterminate the creatures completely. At this point, we know for sure that the woman was going to have another face-off with the xenomorphs, but no way we saw the Acheron Queen coming on screen. Needless to say, she was fierce, and somewhere you can see both Ripley and the Queen acting on maternal instinct to protect the kids. The former destroyed the Queen's babies by burning them down, and you can see how hysterically she screeched. However, Queen Acheron wasn't that easy to overpower. She managed to sneak into the spaceship and kept attacking until the very end. Yes, Ripley ultimately killed her by shooting her into space, but before that, Queen Akron gave us a full show of her power and even unleashed the deadly tail. See, Queen Akron might have been somewhat smaller compared to other Queen Xenomorphs we would have encountered, yet her intelligence was unparalleled. We'd witnessed how quickly she learnt about elevator function and negotiated with Ripley. In fact, many sources suggest that the Queen Akron made a calculated choice to make the atmosphere processing plant her hive. Firstly, it was warm, and secondly, its location amongst the processor's key components would make it difficult to destroy. There's one more thing that caught my attention. She aggressively chased Newt. Now, do you think this was out of instinct or some sort of revenge on Ripley for killing her children? I'm inclined to go with the latter, because that would not only make our queen clever, but also sensitive to emotions. Alright guys, that's all for today. There are obviously more Xenomorph Queens in the extended lore, but these happen to be our top picks for the day. If there's one takeaway from this video, it's that Xenomorph Queens were a complete nightmare. No matter the situation, they would fight till their last breath and do anything to protect their brood. Do I like these utterly frightening queens? No, I love them. Let us know your thoughts about these boss babes in the comments below. I'll see you in the next one.